today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
That was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth earlier boasting the successes of Operation Epic Fury, claiming the intensity of the strikes on Iran will only get bigger.
It's been nearly a week and a half since the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran. U.S. officials say they are close to completing their mission, but there is still no specifics on a timeline or plan on what happens after.
We want to bring in now retired Marine Colonel and Senior Advisor for the Center for Strategic International Studies, Colonel Mark Cantian. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a frequent friend of the show over the past week and a half. I want to start with this, kind of what we talked about there. There isn't a clear what comes next. We heard from the Secretary that ultimately the aftermath will be in America's interest. We won't live under nuclear blackmail. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also said something that the President said. He's encouraging Iranians to step up and overthrow the regime. What do you believe comes next? What are our goals after this operation has concluded?
Well, that's a great question. In the press conference, Secretary Hegseth laid out the three goals the United States was pursuing, that is, eliminating the ballistic missile and drone capabilities, production facilities, eliminating the Iranian Navy, and eliminating its nuclear program. There wasn't anything in there about regime change. There wasn't anything in there about unconditional surrender, the implication being that if the current regime were willing to accept those conditions, then the United States would end the conflict. Not clear what happens if they refuse and continue to refuse as they've been doing.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, Colonel, as far as what both Pete Hegseth and what General Kane were saying, but we heard Hegseth say starting today, the accelerator is going even more so, as far as 20 times the amount of intensity is going to start today. We've already done a lot. I say we, America has already done a lot in the last 10 days. Where do you see that intensity ramping up? Is it... we heard him say more intelligence is being used. Is it more specific and strategic areas that they haven't already taken out?
I think they're continuing to work down the target list for those priority goals. So they're hitting nuclear facilities, some facilities above ground. These would be laboratories. They might be workshops. We're hitting underground targets as we can identify them. We're using some bunker buster munitions, but those are against the ballistic missile production facilities and storage. We're going after the Iranian Navy, the remaining elements of it. Keep in mind, the United States is working on what they call the Southern Front. So Tehran, targets like that in the north and northwest. Those are the ones the Israelis are taking.
And Colonel, you talked about those three objectives that the Secretary lined out. And one of those is, as you mentioned, kind of targeting those underground areas and those laboratories. And that's to prevent Iran from ever being able to create nuclear weapons again. What else does that look like, though? How can the United States and Israel make sure that Iran doesn't start that development once again?
Well, the short answer is that we can't unless we have some sort of inspection regime, which are common around the world. That is, inspectors go in to ensure that, in fact, there is no operating nuclear effort, and go in periodically to ensure that that is still the case. Keep in mind that we are, it appears, not striking the underground nuclear facilities. There haven't been any reports of that. We've been striking underground production facilities using a different weapon than we used in Midnight Hammer. We're using what's called a Blue 109.
Colonel, I do want to ask, we heard from the Secretary that, again, this is going to be on the President's timeline there, but we also know that this is a joint operation with Israel, as you mentioned, kind of the split up of targets there. If Israel decides that they want to continue the operation, how does that negotiation work? Can you take us inside the war room as you collaborate with another country in a joint operation? How does it go in terms of if one country says, well, we're not done yet? What does that back and forth look like?
Well, this is one of the good things and bad things about Israel as a coalition partner here. On the good side, they are extremely capable. They have excellent intelligence on Tehran. They have capable air forces and military forces. They bring a lot to the table, which is not always the case with U.S. coalition partners. On the other hand, they have opinions of their own, and they have the military forces to enforce those opinions. I think what will happen is when we get close, there will be some tough conversations between President Trump and Netanyahu about what are the conditions under which we stop this war. And that will be out in the public because there'll be a lot of leaks and public discussion about what are the conditions to end the war and why are the U.S. and Israel not agreeing.
Colonel, we have heard President Trump say that he does not want the current regime to stay in power. He would like to see the Iranian people take over their country. What does that overthrow, what does that look like? Thousands of Iranians have been killed, months ago, trying to stand up for what they want. How does a country take that power over from someone that is threatening them?
That's a very difficult question. At the beginning of the conflict, President Trump said that the Iranian people should rise up and overthrow the government, put in a new government. We haven't heard much of that recently because it's so difficult. They would have to take to the streets. The regime has made it clear that they are willing to be extremely ruthless in suppressing dissent. They killed tens of thousands of people back in January. They have their security forces out in force. So it'd be very hard for the people to actually implement this now. The moment for that was back in January.
Colonel, we had a question from someone in the press conference that we just heard talk about what the United States is doing to limit civilian casualties. We talked to you last week about the school in Iran that was hit. At the time, it was unknown where that fire came from. Was it from Israel? Was it from the United States? Was it a missile that had gone rogue? There's some new video evidence that suggests that growing evidence that it could have come from the United States. My question to you is, if the investigation does show that this came from America and it was a mistake on our part, what do those repercussions look like, and does that change anything militarily in our approach?
It doesn't change anything militarily. The United States vets all the targets, works very hard to make sure that they're valid military targets. But mistakes happen, and that was clearly what happened here. The school was near an Iranian naval facility, and for some reason got tagged as part of that facility. We've seen that in all of our previous conflicts. That is, we may try very hard to limit civilian casualties, and we have tools that can predict what casualties, what the impact of weapon will be and what the effect on surrounding terrain will be. But there are mistakes. When a building gets mislabeled, when there's miscommunication or for whatever reason. And in this case, that looks to be the case. Now we'll see how the investigation comes out, but this was in the U.S. area, and the Pentagon hasn't denied that it might be responsible.
Colonel, we have a little bit less than a minute left. I do want to ask you about that phone call that was mentioned during the briefing there. The phone call with Russia that the president had. Seems like there was an understanding, hopefully making some headway on what's going on in Ukraine, but also understanding that Russia would not get involved in what's going on with Iran. I think it's continued to be their stance that they don't want any involvement in it, and it doesn't seem like that would be a tipping point. But also, we're not, as one reporter suggested, Russia's not coming to the United States' aid in Iran either.
Well, no. Russia has been closely aligned with Iran. Iran has provided a lot of help to the Russians in its war with Ukraine. For example, the Shahed 136 drones. I suspect that President Trump asked Putin to stop providing intelligence to the Iranians, as has been reported. Personally, I doubt that they will stop that. Iran is a client. They want to be seen to be at least helpful to a client. It's been very embarrassing to them that two of their clients, Venezuela and Iran, now look like they're being hammered by the United States without any real help from Russia.
Retired Marine Colonel Mark Kansian out of Washington. Colonel, we always thank you for your insight in breaking down that press conference last hour. We know today, 11, most intense day inside Iran. We'll be seeing where this goes over the next few days. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me on the program.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.